I have two questions. One question, in fact, is directed at two speakers. Professor Oppebeck and to Bill Boyd. Yesterday we had a presentation from the Dean of the Business School from the Northern Iowa, and he was really happy that none of the managers that were employed in corruption and other dealings as such were from his university. In that sense, and picking on Bill's presentation about universities being as bastions of ethics and culture and responsibility, how can that be transmitted to students? And in particular at your university, that seems to have very strong linkages with industry. So how can you adapt that to the curriculum? And to Professor Oppebeck, how can the such dramatic and kind of negative stance that managers have in the use of technology can be changed through education, in particularly complementing ICT with business education. My other question would be for Vanessa. You're dealing with schools from all over the world. In that sense, in that organization and in all the program, how are you dealing in terms of classes with totally different forms of apprehending knowledge and even being at the class? So in terms of communication, how are you dealing with that? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, but I should say that when I talk about universities as being bastions of ethical practice, I think by and large it's correct, but it's a sort of a goal. You know, it's something that says that, you know, our primary interest is in knowledge and social development, and therefore, you know, if we have a set of values, that we should be articulating them. In very practical terms, my university is having a discussion about what our core values are, and there is a discussion amongst academics about what these are. It's not necessarily the same corporate core values that our executive have, but at a pedagogical level, what we actually identify is what we call graduate attributes, and these are a set of values. Some of them I think we would call ethical values, some are professional values, that we could certify our students, our graduates, and we've tested them on, would hold when they leave our courses. Now, this is in part a very practical, pragmatic response. It's from employers saying, how do we know that your students have the characteristics that you claim that they should have? So, for example, we have a list of 7 graduate attributes, and amongst them there's one that makes reference to understanding and adherence to ethical views and codes of practices and so forth. Now, the practical implication of that is then when we design our curriculum, that we embed learning material and assessment right through the curriculum, not necessarily at every point, and in fact the trick is to get a balance, but that we develop students' abilities and attributes. Some of it's very material, it's content driven, some of it's to do with attitudes and values, and then amongst there are attitudes of ethical concern. So it's the practical way that we actually manage that. In theory, if this works, we're at a development stage, it's over the last few years and it's slowly embedding, we should be able to at least stand up and say our graduates have been given a course which is founded on a set of principles that is designed to ensure that they receive the right kind of content and learning, and that we have tested them and been able to say, yes, this person meets the standards that we think is important. Those standards evolve out of our own understanding of our scholarship, they evolve out of our understanding of what society expects of us and of our graduates, including industry partners.
May I be just a little bit provocative and So how do you react to those assessments from firms that hire new employees, new graduates coming from out of the university? And one of the first things that they tell them is, forget what have you learned in university. You're going to be trained here.
That's part of a dialogue that we have, and I suppose that comes back to that ethics of critique, is that we engage in these sort of discussions. In fact, when that happens, it's more likely that the forgetting is not so much of an attitude or virtue, if you like, or a character. It's to do with specific content. And I think because we work closely with industry partners, very often our content is aligned to needs. We have to temper it, of course, with our own view of what is scholarly of value. But there are times when we recognise that what we will do is give students the foundation to learn the particular skills and knowledge that they might need in a particular employment setting. But it's the fundamental attitude, it's the character of the person which is embedded and which I think employers don't forget. I think if we get it right and an employer makes that demand on one of our graduates, they should be able to say, no, I don't accept this different ethic, if you like. I don't know if that will happen. The graduates, of course, need jobs, and they may find that they are compromised, but they will understand that they're compromised, which I think is important.
Thank you for your interesting question. In fact, it is very important that we can learn something from such a study of a metaphor and rediscovering essential aspects behind our current problems. Of course, I didn't have enough time to show the last part, but in the last part we had something I think very interesting. The first presentation this morning was on Thomas Aquinas, and there we have a very interesting scheme of ethics where virtues are central. But the problem with Thomas Aquinas is perhaps the same problem as we have nowadays, and what we rediscover in this text of Orfeo, that at a certain moment ethics really risk to be just window dressing. And I think we are perhaps hopefully ending this stage in business ethics, that we see that at a certain moment, like we got with the financial crisis, only ethics in mission statements doesn't work. That you have the problem, like Plato explained, between Timos and Epitimos, and all the financial crisis in the States where it began is the over-exaggerating on the Epitimos, where the want to have houses and all the problems we know is so exaggerated that we need some counterbalance. So I think more and more, and also in the States, more and more in faculties, we see that it is less the accent on ethics in business schools that is important, but the accent on sense-giving or spirituality. Spirituality, in fact, the driving force behind any ethical system. You can't be really ethical in practice, and this is your question, without any spirituality behind. Or it is a kind of Taoistic spirituality, or it is a Buddhistic one, or it is a Christian one, or it is one of the Jewish, the Kabbalah and so. But if you don't have that spirituality behind, at a certain moment, your ethical system in your mission statement just are words, just are window dressing. So in fact, more and more people in their personal life, but also in the network context, realize that if we want to go further, if we want to really having a kind of education system that goes further, this accent and this openness for the spirituality behind is very important. And this is what is shown in the last part, where Orfeo rediscovers Apollo, and he sees, well, I have exaggerated with not accepting that fundamental balance is very necessary in personal life and in network life. It is not